Started from the bottom, kept on climbing, perfect timing, looking down from the top. I don't see no opposition from my position. I'm focused. It's the must, I complete the mission. I won't stop, I can't stop. The grind is all I know. I'm focused, I can't stop. The hustle's all I know. I'm hungry, ambitious. My heart is on go. You in the presence of greatness. That's all you need to know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Identity Jedi Show podcast. We're coming at you again. We got another banger interview for you coming up. And of course, we've got some updates to give you guys. Listen, this has been an absolute spectacular season. Loving all the guests that is coming on. We've got so much planned for this season. So we want to make sure that you're involved. You know what's coming on. So number one, you need to get to the mailbag, identityjedi@gmail.com. The stuff that is coming in has been great. Cannot wait for this mailbag episode that you guys are going to get. So keep sending in the good stuff. Also, let us know where you want us to do a live show. We've got two areas right now. We're looking at Austin and San Francisco. So we're going to do a Austin version and a West Coast version of the Identity Jedi Show live taping in the audience. Listen, the one at Identiverse was absolutely amazing. You can check that out. That's streaming on the platform right now. We want to bring that same flavor to wherever you are. So let us know, identityjedi@gmail.com. Also, of course, you know, we got the newsletter popping up. So go over to the identityjedi.com. Check out the newsletter. Drops every second Wednesday. Sometimes I mean Thursday if I kind of get behind, but we've been on it. Also, you got a blog coming at you every Monday. We got all kind of good stuff going on over there. We just launched a mastery program. We launched that earlier this year. Listen, I'm dropping frameworks, deep dives, ebooks, all kind of stuff there. So if you're looking for like the hands-on, like how do I go about this stuff, that's where you want to be. The Identity Jedi Mastery Program is available there, so you get access to more content. Of course, you have the premium version of the newsletter. Get your own premium newsletter and access to behind-the-scenes things from the podcast. So all kinds of good stuff that's coming at you there. Of course, you have Identity Jedi University as well. So listen, a bunch of good stuff. But you guys have been locked in. We appreciate it. Keep sharing. Keep growing this thing. We're trying to take this thing to the moon. So before we jump to our interview, I want to talk about kind of the theme coming in for this interview is, you know, I was talking to this gentleman, and I'm not going to spoil it. You're going to wait till you get the interview to find out who it is, but about what's going on in the identity industry and the pace that we've seen innovation just happening overall in tech and what we think that means for identity. Listen, I wrote in the newsletter a while ago about what I'm calling identity security posture management. Like, I just know that's going to become a thing, and I talk about that a little bit in the interview that you're going to see. And tune in after the break. I'm going to give you my full rant on what I think about that. But really what it comes down to is, as we've been embracing identity and moving it from infrastructure and IT over to security, and we start to realize what this really means. Where do we sit this thing called identity in the form of our security architecture, and moving from a admin type, you know, behind the scenes type of thing to a straight proactive, we are in the day-to-day actually securing and enabling the business. It's such a big mind shift that has to happen, both in how we develop our products, and so what we have coming in the identity industry, but also as a practitioner and the type of things that we need to do. And I've also been on this rampage lately of making sure that we can actually measure statistics, and we're learning how to speak business with an identity. And when I talk about that, like finding your real KPIs and breaking down milestones of how you are showing real value in your business, we've got to be able to start talking in those terms when it comes to running these things in an enterprise program. So whether or not you're 500 people or 500,000 people, you've got to be able to look at your identity program and go in the steps that we're taking, whether it's apps that we're onboarding, provisioning that we're doing, MFA that we're rolling out, whatever it is you're doing, it's got to be mapped and taking steps to showing how you're driving business initiatives, right? So whether or not you're saying, listen, we rolled out MFA and we've got 60% coverage, 70% coverage, be able to track that coverage quarter to quarter, month to month, whatever your business likes to report on, and show the growth and the steps that you're taking, but also how that's tying back to, are you reducing risk in your organization? Are you better helping to enable a certain business to do things faster? Whatever it is you're doing, we have to learn how to talk in those terms. And there's been a ton of things that I've written over the past, couple of months that talks about that. So, shout out again to the newsletter to go read about that. But these are the things that we have to start doing. And it's how we have to grow up as an industry together. So, Really quick rant there to start this off. Don't forget about our sponsor, Leo Vici, where you can get all the Leo Vici brand. We've got an Identity Jedi collection that's on there, the unofficial collection. It's just a bunch of stuff that I like on there. Use code Identity Jedi. You get 15% off. That's leovici.com. Hit the show notes for the links. So let's get you over to the interview, and then stay tuned after that. I'm going to tell you everything that I think about identity, AI, security, posture management, what it should be. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's get you to the interview first. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another interview here on the Identity Jedi Show. You guys know what it is. All the guests that come on this show are special is because of the way that we bring in these guests. And I am so excited to have another great conversation. This one, we've been planning for a couple of weeks, man. Schedules have been crazy, but we finally got it down. And so I'm happy to introduce you guys to the guest that's coming up. Real quick shout out. I know some of you guys are going to be wondering, because this is probably like the third or fourth episode you guys see now. I'm like, where's Samir? Don't worry, Samir's coming back. He's not been kicked off the show. We all know the guys, life happens, but Samir is always checking everything out. We are planning something big coming up soon. We are going to be doing another live Identity Jedi show in Austin. That's right in Samir's backyard. I get to come back to Austin and hang out, so you will definitely see him for that. So no worries on that one. Let's get to our interview today. Before we get started, I'm going to let our guest introduce himself, tell him a little bit about what he's going on, and we're going to hop straight to the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, David, and thanks for having me. This is a fantastic show. I'm a big fan of the show and the newsletter both, and obviously, miss Samir today, but I know he'll be back. So my name is Abhay Kulkarni. I'm the founder and CEO of a identity security startup called Widefield Security. We are helping enterprises detect, respond, and remediate attacks on their identities, including human and non-human. While doing so, we actually have a very unique way of helping them also improve their posture and their static configuration as well. That's one of the reasons why we call it wide field. We give them a wide field of view to the identity surface area, and that's the name of the company.
Nice, man. And obviously, we got connected through Samir, and Samir hit me up and goes, man, you got to talk to Abhay, like what he's doing with Widefield. And we talked, it was probably about 2 months ago, and I was like, oh my God. It was near and dear to my heart because I loved everything about it because, as most of my followers know, I helped found an ITR company, and we didn't make it and decided to go different ways. But I love this aspect of identity because it's part of this aspect of moving identity from this heavily administrative and admin time type function to a true proactive function where you are really involved in making sure that you're doing what we say we do, identity security, right? And helping secure that. So, with that standpoint, take us back a little bit about how you thought about this space and you looked at it and said, this is the way that we want to go. Was it, I want to go to that moment where the thought hit you, you were like, oh no, this is exactly what we're doing. What was that like?
Well, yeah, part of that moment, by the way, so before this, I was running WebEx at Cisco. And while running WebEx, we've had an interesting incident. It was in the news, so I'm not divulging anything serious here. But that really opened my eyes to how easy it is for attackers to find and abuse credentials and accounts. Initially, obviously, every single person is naive about this. They look at it and say, oh yeah, I can solve this with MFA or passwordless. They said, why is it that even after people who deploy passwordless and MFA and all these things, still you end up having these problems and these fairly nasty breaches, right? When you look at like everything that happened with MGM and all the other, large sort of publicized breaches, you could see that there are a variety of reasons. And what we found out was the problems were kind of whack-a-mole. Sometimes there is a dormant account that somebody abused. Sometimes there was a system account or service account, non-human identity that somebody found and abused. Sometimes it was a session hijacking attack, social engineering attacks, all kinds of things, right? And when you look at it, like, okay, so you're saying that I need to do like every single attack I need to solve it with a different mechanism, right? That just doesn't scale. People don't have the wherewithal, the time, the energy, the money to actually do that. So we said, is there a way we could solve this in a way that we can actually stand behind the solution? And we said, we can actually help you identify any such patterns that go on in your enterprise. And we spent a lot of time thinking about that. That's when I decided, like, this is worthwhile building a company on. We talked to a bunch of folks like yourself, people like you, not you yourself, but a lot of people like you, and got a lot of validation early And then we went about heads down building the solution. It was a pretty intricate solution to build because we are not just doing posture. We have this whole concept around identity in use. So we wanted to focus a lot on post-authentication activities. And then we sort of started to think about identity like data. That was the aha moment for us, saying, like, you know what, let's go build this and take this to market.
I love it, man. There's so many newcomers coming into identity from adjacent markets that I love the energy and the new way of thinking that new people are bringing into, and it's a perfect time in identity. And I know a lot of people that listen and watch, I say this a lot, but like this is the most innovative and exciting time in identity right now because of where the market has driven us to, right? And to really realizing that, man, like, listen, this thing really does have to be at the forefront. We really got to start treating identity different, even to the fact that we're finally starting to see. I remember talking about this a couple of years ago and it was kind of all this, it was kind of like the sexy thing to say, like, oh, we moved identity under our security team. And now it's like, I'm seeing more and more organizations doing that. I just had a conversation with a CISO who said he was just on a year battle of moving the identity team from infrastructure to security, because he's like, this needs to be a part of what we're doing from a security perspective. So I need them under my purview, working with our SOC analysts, working with our security guys. What is your take on how you've seen the industry, right? Just in the time that you've been in and started the company, what's your take on how you've seen the industry evolve and the trends that you're seeing that line up to where you guys are trying to go?
Yeah, great question. And by the way, kudos to that CISO. If he got the team under him, that is half the battle won, because I'm sure they will now implement the standard. So my tryst with identity actually started many, many decades ago, David. I'm going to date myself. So I actually implemented integration with Solaris. This was before Solaris had LDAP, and something called NIST and NIST Plus, and integrated that with Windows NT's file system. So we were running an NFS server, and you wanted to take NTFS permissions and somehow map that when, what ACLs are is identity, right? So that was when I started. So I've been staying pretty close to that. That was 97. Yeah. This was before Active Directory and LDAP took over. But, one of the reasons I feel strongly about this space is if you compare cybersecurity and, if you look at the large platforms of cybersecurity, you can think about endpoints, cloud, network. They have evolved into fairly large platforms. They cover a lot. If you look at SASE, the people in SASE cover network, security, firewall, proxy, everything, right? Same thing with endpoint. They have people like CrowdStrike covering everything on endpoints. Same thing on cloud with CSPM and CNAP. But identity, it's still very fragmented. We have IAM, we have PAM, we have IGA, right? Three disconnected systems that rarely talk to each other. And if they do, if you kind of go with a single vendor approach, they still are not very complementary in how they sort of look at it from an end-to-end security perspective. So we thought that, yes, there is an opportunity actually to go and help this industry in general sort of build a platform that sort of looks at this end-to-end. That was the first moment. And the second thing was really, when you think about large security engineering efforts, right, you always start with preventative technologies, right? You want to say, just like endpoint, started with anti-malware. I spent a lot of time building anti-malware products at Symantec. And then, CrowdStrike came along and said, you know what? Malware is not your problem. Adversary is your problem, right? So you need to start stopping the adversary rather than saying, oh, I blocked that malware. That is not the end. Same thing is true for identity as well. It's not just I deployed MFA, I have passwordless. You still have an adversary who is hell-bent on finding that one account, one credential, one session token, somewhere that they can go take in and use that and get into your virtual premise. And obviously with the advent of cloud and SaaS. And then obviously the last part is on AI, right? I mean, I will tell you some tidbits around what we have seen with AI with our customers, but that is going to expose the soft underbelly of identity, in my opinion, in a big way, because AI is here. It's not coming, it's here. And people are starting to use it. And I don't think the identity systems are there to help them with their deployment of large scale AI as well. So, AI agents, workflows, everything, all of them together.
Yeah. I feel like I am on the other side of a lot of people, my friend group around AI. I say that it's the most transformational thing that I've ever seen in my career. And now I'm starting to say in my lifetime, I've never seen anything move this fast, both from customer adoption, but also the actual product. The comparison I hear is like SaaS. SaaS was, we saw user adoption and the whole shadow IT thing, but here we're seeing user adoption, but then on the other side, the product itself is changing so rapidly, right?
Yes.
In a year, you'll see 3 to 4x feature growth in an AI product and the abilities for these things to do. But also, like, I've been having this conversation lately, so I want to get your take on this, right? Like, when we start to look at this, how I put it this past students that are like AI security posture management. I'm not going to be surprised if we don't hear that either by the end of this year or like going into next year.
Has to
And in
happen.
fact, I wholeheartedly know that somebody right now, this minute, is doing a pitch to a VC and saying, we're going to be the next AI security posture management.
Right.
But when I look at that, honestly, it all comes down to what you said, like identity and data. That's your AI security posture management, because
Right.
AI is just ML algorithms that looks at data and either structured or unstructured, looks at patterns, and then creates things off of that data. So
Right.
you've got to understand what data it's accessing, how
Right.
it's coming up with that data and make recommendations on it. And now the things that it can do, it's going to make new data based off of that data. So I'm telling an AI agent to go do something on behalf of me or on behalf of this service and go bring something back. And so what does that authorization model look like? There's what the AI is authorized to do to go look at all this information, but it's
Right.
what the proxy user application is authorized to see based on the information back. And that all comes down to data security. Like it's whether or not you want to go back to DRM or data security posture management, all this stuff that we've punted on, right? Years ago, we said it's too hard. We don't want to do it. In my humble opinion, I think that's the only way you truly get there. So what's your thoughts on that, right? How do we look at this and go, we know identity is going to be a part of this. What does that look like for, truly trying to secure AI and helping enterprises adopt it?
David, first of all, you're spot on about AI. The Scale AI founder, Alexander Wang, right? He always says this, like, there are 3 pillars to AI: the data, there is the algorithms, and then there is the compute. But I think there's a 4th pillar, like you mentioned, which is identity. And identity spans how AI, the algorithms access data, what permissions they have, how long can they access something, and when they distill the data and then sort of derive new data, like you said, out of it, who should have access to that data, right?
Right.
And it's a very, very hard problem to solve. What we are seeing is that there is a mad rush for enterprises to show that AI is helping their top line and bottom line, right? So adoption of new technologies is crazy. And I'll give you one quick example. So on May 19th, Microsoft at the Build conference launched quite a few AI announcements. One of them was there's something called Copilot Studio, where someone like you and I can log into Copilot Studio and create my own agent. How do you start to control these access? Because what we saw was at our customer environment, lots and lots of employees, they said, oh, I got access to Copilot Studio. At one customer, we saw like more than 300 Copilot Studio launched by individual employees, giving broad access to their entire mailbox, broad access to their entire OneDrive, etc., to write a simple agent like, oh, scan my mailbox, and whenever David Lee sends me an email, text me because I don't want to miss his email. Something similar to that, right? Some simple stuff like that. And that really sort of makes me realize is that identity is the tip of the spear for AI. And if I am a CISO and I cannot say no to AI, right? Like there is no, if I'm a CISO that says no to AI, I get, shoved out of the door. So I have to say, yes, but I will control the identity layer, and I want to make sure that the permissions that you grant, the access that you grant, it is I can control it, I can watch it, I can monitor it. It's ephemeral, it's not perpetual, and I can have some means of checking whether the whole system is working. And I think that's where a lot of people, CISOs, would want to kind of have that particular handle on AI through the lens of identity, in addition to the AISPM pieces that you mentioned, right? So that's my humble belief is like, you need to have a lot of control over AI. And the only way you can do that is by looking at identity and what permissions and how long the permissions have been granted. Is it working the way it's supposed to work? Or is there an AI agent that is now run amok and going and querying every single file in there? So that's what you need to start to control with identity and AI.
Yeah, it is. When I look at it, I see like 2. So I think, like, again, data security, I think that's going to come back, right? We're going to go back and have to figuring out the whole data tagging thing and all the stuff that we want to do. I got a feeling that's going to come back around. But also, man, I lost my train of thought. What was the other one? It'll come back to me later. There's another aspect of this that I'm like, we tried this years ago and it didn't take off, and I think we're going to have to come back to it.
You talked about DRM, rights management, right?
Yeah, it's DRM, but it's more on like there's the data side, but then there's also like, I think that just you talk to the aspect of a CISO right now, trying to get a grasp of this and saying, how am I going to help the business enable this? Because you're absolutely right. I can't say no. And honestly, it doesn't really matter if I say no anyway, they're already using it, right? Like I already know that if somebody's using ChatGPT, somebody's using Perplexity, somebody's using something, and then like Microsoft, like, okay, somebody's using Copilot Studio to create these things. So it's how do you go about having a true governance layer of like, what is going on, right? What is going on through my data and AI, and what are people asking, and what data does it have access to? And it's the hard problem. It's almost similar to the problem when we first started going to like cloud apps and things of that nature, because you don't have a central place that everybody's going through, right? So when everybody had the VPN, it's like, okay, well, like I'm directing your traffic and going. But once we went cloud, like, we had to have your Zscalers. You had to have something out there, some kind of CASB, some kind of cloud access broker to go, I've got to find a way to centralize where everybody's going so I can see. And you don't have that. Reason number 5,432, I would not want to sit in the CISO seat. Questions that I wouldn't want to answer, but it becomes fascinating thought exercises as we look at it and go, where does this kind of come into place? And I want to dig in on the governance side of it, right? Because I think out of all things, I think that's where it starts with, right? I got to be able to see and control, kind of what's going there. And then, back to identities, right? I'm willing to bet that at some aspect, you're going to have to see within products, right, the ability to classify and identify like the different AI things that are going on, even if it's just from the permission side of it, to go, hey, like here are the permissions and accounts that I've given access to.
Right.
I'm curious with you guys, like looking at that, right, on the more threat detection side. And don't give away any trade secrets. But the question I want to ask is like, how are you guys looking at that from a model of like, hey, like, what can we do around detecting like, possible like AI threats and things that we could look at to kind of help users not only understand like, well, here's what's going on for identities, but we're going to start seeing these attack vectors.
No, it's a great question. I think you talked about it, right? I mean, when cloud SaaS came along, we kind of lost the sense of perimeter, the choke point that we had for inspecting network traffic. And that's why SASE came about. And I was at Netscope, and Netscope, Zscaler, Palo Alto, they provide this distributed, sort of enforcement of policy so that you can go directly to the cloud from your home. I think it's actually, to be honest with you, that's one of the things that we set out to do, is that can we create a choke point for identity? And what is that choke point would be? Like if I want to monitor every single access in my enterprise, whether it is by humans, by non-humans, service accounts, cloud workloads, etc., what would that choke point be? The concept of a session is actually very important. So now you and I are identity geeks, so I'll geek out here a little bit. Let's take the simplest example of SAML, right? You have an IDP and you authenticate with IDP and you get the assertion posted back to the application. Let's say Slack. Slack will give you back a long-lived session token. Now your session exists as long as the session is supposed to live, depending upon various configuration parameters. Now that session can do lots of things. The authentication happened maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. The session continues on. Now look forward to AI, right? I talked about the Copilot Studio agent. You give it access one time with a refresh token, and it is going to continue to refresh the access until perpetuity, until you go and say, I want to revoke the token. I want to revoke access. And I think some of that is built because you don't want that friction, people using AI agents saying, I want to authenticate again. I need to authorize again. I don't know what permissions it needed. So it's that friction. The product managers who are building AI products, they're looking at that and saying, oh, I don't want that friction. So that friction is creating all kinds of problems with user adoption. So that's why they want to kind of go about figuring out, stopping that friction. And the easy answer is give perpetual access, give long-lived sessions. So what we decided to do was the threat actors are going to find the easiest way in. And they are trying to get to that resource, that data. They want to steal something. They want to get to a valuable asset, the crown jewel that you have in your enterprise. And to do that, if they are going to abuse identities, they're going to create a session. So what if you can actually track every single session in your entire enterprise, find out all the good sessions, and then have a lens around, wait a minute, some of these other things are suspicious. I need to go and find out why they're happening. And then back that session with all the information that you have about the identity. What is that identity doing? Is it human or non-human? Is it a derived identity or derived credential out of where it started from? Construct the whole graph. And now you can actually shed light on a lot of things that you previously were just assuming, oh, this looks like an innocuous access, right? Now you can say, wait a minute, it doesn't look innocuous. It's much more than that, because I now see this particular sort of TTP around threat actors, the tactics, techniques, and procedures that are used by a scattered spider, for example, or for a looser, for example. When you start to look at them from a lens of a session, you get this very interesting choke point, and you can start to observe behavior at very detailed level. And that's one of the reasons why we set about doing this, this company, and to kind of build it out with that whole concept in mind, and then work backwards from there into all the others, the governance pieces and the static configuration there as well. So doing that actually helps you really figure out all different types of malicious or accidental behavior that you should be stopping in your enterprise. And that applies to human behavior, non-human behavior, and obviously agentic AI behavior as well.
Yeah. Listen, I absolutely love that approach. I'm trying to remember when I first wrote about this. I think it was when I've probably written about it a couple of times.
I read your newsletter, by the way. You talked about this, and I almost sort of jumped out and saying, wow, there's David talking about the same thing. I'm quite sure I can dig it up, and I have that newsletter highlighted.
Yeah, because I always said that, like, to your point about the session, to truly have control and visibility, right, you have to start at the closest point to where the user interacts, right? Where the user first is starting to get involved. That's the authentication side, but past the authentication side is that session, right?
Right.
Once they're authenticated and they start doing, then I said that the reason why that's most important is because at that point, what do I know? As soon as the user authenticates and to create the session, I know who the user is.
Right.
I know where they're trying to go. So I kind of have some intent on what they're trying to do. I know the application that they're trying to get to, right?
Right.
And at that point, I've got some, cacheable level attributes of what that user is. And, we never, because identity was so, separated, because when we started doing this, it was the whole best of breed world.
That's right.
We only took the session and said, oh, that's all we needed for authentication. And we didn't share it across anything else. And so now, with CAPE and shared signals and all this stuff, now we're starting to look at this and truly make a more connected network. But that ability to understand that flow, and to your point, to track a user throughout what they're doing and be able to have that interaction, the concept of the session, in my humble opinion, needs to spread from your IDP to your governance to your threat detection. Like, that whole concept of that session needs to spread all the way through, because you need to be able to make policy decisions across, okay, now they're trying to use the same session, right, to go access this application. They want to do this. Okay. Once they do and they authenticate in, what privileges do they now have, right? Let's do SOD checks. That's usually locked within our governance system, right? You have access policies around where they can access. So you're checking at login to the application whether or not they can access that. But then once they're in, what are they doing? Am I still running those policy checks? Or like this whole active part of being able to see the user in a session, right? I mean, it's stuff that we haven't looked at and built towards identity, and for a number of reasons. One, like, identity's been stuck in the IT infrastructure. We think of it as tickets and provisioning and help desk. Two, like, the whole best of breed nature had all of us going across into these different areas. So it's going to be interesting to see this next decade of identity as people start to realize it's got to be platforms. I think the next major milestone is, and Okta's kind of trying to do it with an IGA and a PAM, but like some merger, right? Microsoft's always been bad at this because I just think they hate identity. They're just like, okay, we'll just authenticate you and all this other stuff we don't do well, right? But I think, like, to have that true platform, for us to really say that identity platform, you got to have every single pillar, right? You've got to have an IDP, you've got to have the authentication session, you've got to have the access manager piece, you got to have the governance piece. PAM, honestly, sorry, PAM folks, PAM is just IGA. That's really all it is. It's really all it ever was. We're starting to see that already, right? We've got to be able to say, from the moment I authenticate and know who you are, and first create your digital identity, you authenticate in session, I authorize all the other stuff that I want to do, the threat detections against it, the governance, the access certifications, all that's got to be included. Because now, I mean, just think about what that changes, right? Certifications to be able to say, no, right now, go run a simulated test, go look at Dave and then go grab a session. What can he get access to, right? Is that against policy, right? Run simulations based on what he does have. What could he get access to? What does that give me within a blast radius of he has this access? Can he get to this resource and this resource? And if we can understand that we're moving against that, we can start to model against, to your point, like whether it's non-human, whether it's agentic, whatever, we can look at how an identity moves across sessions and we can start to separate the two. Right now, it's the Wild Wild West. It's going to be impossible because we just don't know what that looks like. I think there's a ton more innovation coming in this space. I'm so happy to have people such as yourself in this space and more coming in and creating this, because it starts all these conversations. The poor CISOs and poor IAM directors are like, dude, I'm still trying to get over manual certifications. And now you're telling me I got to deal with all this. I get it. But it's the times, right? It's where we're kind of moving. So
it is absolutely time to do that. And we talked about maturity of identity platforms, right? When we started. And I have this analogy that I always use with network security. So back in the day, back in the year 2000, network security was mostly firewalls, right? I put a firewall, I have a DMZ, and the firewalls were mostly port-based firewalls. Like, I'm going to block this port, I'm going to block incoming ports. That's it, pretty much. Then, circa 2005-06, Palo Alto came along saying, you know what? You're blind to all the network traffic. I'm going to do HTTPS, and I'm going to do App ID. And then Palo Alto, became a platform just on that one simple idea, right? That I'm shedding light on encrypted traffic in the firewall. And then, a few years later, we, Netscope, Zscaler, others saying, you know what? That's not enough. I'm going to terminate TLS. I'm going to do deep inspection of what is happening in your SaaS and cloud. And I'm going to tell you exactly what kind of policies you can apply for malware and DLP. So now the amount of inspection that is possible on your network data is crazy. We are stuck at the very high level. Yes, we moved from individual identities to directories to federated identities with SAML. But, we still have like lots of things that are still sort of broken in the entire end-to-end scenario. And I think to your point, governance, access management, privileges, all of that should actually tie into the runtime environment, because we know that static governance is not enough. We need to kind of go into runtimes, and we need to kind of go into that next level detail. So I'm super excited about this whole area in identity, where it is going and where it needs to go. And I think there is absolutely a need for a very large platform to emerge out of this to kind of build some of these things. And I'm sure you guys are doing a lot of good work there as well, David. But there are lots of other companies, and including us, right? We are going to throw our hat in and say, hey, we can contribute to this.
Listen, I've always been. It was funny. We were on a Slack channel, and I was talking about some certain stuff that we as a company need to look at. And then somebody asked, like, oh, what are our competitors doing? I was like, dude, I'm in the Kobe Bryant form. I'm Mamba mentality. The only competition I have is me, right? The only competition we have is us in front of us. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. And that's not to an arrogant aspect, but it's like you have to focus on what you can do and what the next steps are in front of you. There's so much space here for everybody to kind of operate. And it's, at the end of the day, we're all serving the same customer. I get it. Competitors, whatever, people fight over money and space and all this stuff, and everybody wants to grow. But the reality is this problem is big enough, right, that there's going to be need for all types of combinations, and just the way people like to secure things, right? Even as we see this and go into one platform, I mean, we saw this on the security side, right? CISOs will say, okay, well, that's great. Well, I want to go with this just because I don't want everything on that whole platform, even though it might be better for me, right? You got to think of backups. You got to think of, like, you always have to have like your backup plans for how do we do this? Because if I've consolidated everything to one and that goes down for whatever reason, how do I continue to operate? So there's always going to be like these ways to kind of operate. But I've always believed in the other sect that like more competition is better, because that forces a better product for the end customer. That's right. It's one of the things I take from Amazon, like realizing that I've always been customer obsessed. I just didn't call it that until I got to Amazon. What makes the customer's job better, easier? How can they go about securing the business and enabling the business the right way? Because I feel like that's our job as technologists in there, to help them understand, here's how you safely use this technology. Here's how you protect against these things, and then go do the great things you want to do. Like, make the great products, go do these things and not have to worry about, from the board level to the CISO, like how many days before I'm on the front page of CNN and being hauled in front of Congress to go say why we got hacked or whatever, right? Super exciting time. I'm so glad to have people such as you yourself and what you guys are doing with the company. So I'm excited to see how you guys grow. I want to wrap it up with a couple of questions. One, the first one is, I like asking people this, right? So you look at the industry today and everything you see, but if I could give you a magic wand and immediately, like, whatever you wanted would happen, like, what's the one thing you would change in the identity landscape that you see today?
That's a great question. And I think I wish there was a single answer, but I'm going to pick one because you asked for it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think enterprises can do today that will make things a lot better from an identity perspective is think about monitoring identities, right? I think we have a set and forget type of mindset when it comes to identity. I deployed MFA and that kind of stuff, or I deployed serverless. And I think there is an angle here which sort of looks at monitoring. You should sort of take it from all the other large platform players. So you monitor your cloud, you are looking for intrusions, you monitor your endpoint, you monitor your network. Why not identity, right? That's one of the biggest pieces there. And how do you do that? You shouldn't rely upon a smart person in front of a SIM as the only way to monitor identity, because it's very, very hard to do that across your entire identity attack surface area, right? Because it's vast and ever growing. So I think there is a absolute need. If all enterprises did that really well, I almost feel like the number of sort of identity incidents that we had will come down dramatically.
Okay. What was the best session that you attended at Identiverse?
The best session that I attended, I'm sorry, did you do a session? I would have said yours, but
It's okay. I did, but it's cool.
I actually was in a bunch of meetings, so I didn't attend a lot of sessions, but I thought the IPSI panel was actually pretty good. I'm actually excited about IPSI as a standard. Now, standards are standards, they take their time to kind of materialize, but IPSI has a lot of promise. One of the reasons why is because IPSI devotes a lot of time to protecting sessions, and that is near and dear to me. So there's a whole spec devoted towards that, and I feel like finally the industry is waking up to kind of thinking about it that way. Outside of that, there was a really awesome panel on Tuesday on the real identity and AI intersection. I forget the gentleman's name. We can probably throw it in show notes once I find the name of the persons.
Okay, cool. Awesome, man. Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes for the links there. I unfortunately didn't get to attend any of the sessions. I was in meetings, running around all day. Then I had my 2 sessions. But just hearing from different people running around at Identiverse, I heard a lot of good things about different sessions. I heard the workshops, the NHI workshops on Monday were like, everybody loved those. I didn't run into one person that they didn't have a great time at that. So I'm so glad that they did that. So Andy Hindle, if you're listening, John Whelan, like, keep the workshops, right? That was major props for the workshops. I love Identiverse, man. I love to see the growth of it. It's gotten bigger and bigger. I got to find out about this whole November thing that they're doing, the one in DC. Like, I feel like they sprung that on us. I'm like, what? So Andy, you're going to be getting an email from me. I want to understand what's going on. It would be cool to attend that one. So listen, man, thanks so much for your time. I want to be respectful of it. You are welcome back on the show anytime you want. Love having great conversations about identity. I will keep you in the loop on the live show in Austin. We're going to try and do that. I've said this a couple of times. Give the people a time frame. Probably late summerish. The middle of summer in Austin is not the time.
The only way you can bring people there is then you can have to tempt them with a really nice barbecue. The best barbecues are in Austin.
This is true. Like we can't, like we didn't do one. We didn't do it last time, but I'm like, we can't get back to Austin and do a live show and at our barbecue. So we'll it's a whole setup. I'm gonna get the team started and we'll find logistics and all that stuff, whatever. But that'll happen. We're gonna try and do 2, one in Austin, and then we're planning a West Coast one as well. So we'll see. But listen, guys, you know what it is. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like, rate, subscribe, whatever platform you listen to this on. It goes a long way. Helps us continue to deliver this great content for you, and we appreciate it. Don't forget, send in your questions, comments to identityjedi@gmail.com. We are trying to collect these for a mailbag edition. So send everything in, all your questions, all your, hey, I'm trying to do this. Send it all in. We want to hear it. We'll do a whole session on it. Thanks again for your time, man. We will see you next time. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Huge shout out to Abhay for coming by the pod and having that conversation with us. I love meeting so many interesting new people coming into the identity space and having these dope conversations. So he is now a friend of the pod. Welcome to come back anytime. So like I teased in the beginning, I want to talk about this idea of identity security posture management. It's not a thing yet, folks. This is what I'm calling it, but I fully expect it to become a thing. Like I said in an interview, I'm pretty sure somebody right now is doing a pitch to a VC talking about identity or AI security posture management and trying to get funding to go do that. But it speaks to a broader aspect of the things that we need to do in order to secure this and then allow the business to enable this going forward. Like, this thing is growing out of control and we get it. It's here to stay. It's not going to go away. But now we're digging into what is the real infrastructure behind all of this. And it comes back to data. Data quality has been shit for years in enterprise, and it's been shit for years in identity. But we're finally getting to a point where we're going to have to come back and try these things that we tried before data tagging, data security, data security posture management. All these things are going to come back up, right? So it comes down to making sure we understand whatever data we're creating. What is that data used for? What resources can access that data? How is that data classified? The classification data is going to become huge again because we're going to need to understand the data that we're feeding to these LLMs, the data that we're letting this AI hit and then reproduce back out. What is the different classifications of the data? So what data are we allowing it to search? What data are we allowing it to mine? What data are we allowing, agentic or any type of AI to take actions on? And then when it starts to create new data, because it will, how do we classify that data? So when I look at this, I immediately think there's going to be a data classification layer. We're going to have to come back to that, figure out a way to classify data. And again, I think this is areas where AI will help because we'll be able to take large sums of data, go through it, and say, help me classify this data and lay out those labels. Once we have the classification, we now need to tie the data classification to the authorization and the access of that data, which of course comes back to identity. Who's allowed to access and get to that data? What are the combinations of data access that we want, and what does that classification mean? And so once you have that, now you have your AI agent sitting on top of it to understand that while they may have wide level access and they can see those things, when they're proxying on behalf of a user or an application, what does that proxy authorization mean, right? This is all things that we've looked at for years, but now I really feel like if we're going to truly deliver guardrails and posture management around identity, we have to be able to understand that and be able to authorize and classify that data damn near real time. Otherwise, we're going to have to create a lot of friction on the AI tools to be able to constantly classify, right? Whether or not we're doing long session tokens or whatever that is, we've got to be able to understand what the AI has access to and what the data behind it is driving it to go and do. And right now, data is just a black box to us. We've just been creating it. I mean, we probably have petabytes of just data floating around. It's all unstructured. It's all out of date. And all these things are going to be important as we continue to see AI on the rise. And so I really think that for anybody that comes out there and says, listen, I'm an AI security posture management, really you're an identity authorization and data security posture management company. And I think that we can see a lot of these platforms in current areas kind of absolve that, probably not the best word to use, but take it, what am I trying to say? Losing my train of thought, but take on that aspect and bring it into the platforms. We're going to continue to see the platformization of identity. And, I said it on the interview, I think there is going to be one big, platform. Somebody's going to make that play to be this one big platform for everybody to rule them all, to bring all of this in. Don't know how well that'll work. We'll see. But this is just an area that I think is going to fastly come up. It's going to be like ITDR. It's going to be like NHI the last couple of years where all of a sudden nobody's going to be talking about it, and then it's going to be the next thing. My bet is next year, 2026, that's going to be the term that everybody's using, right? It's going to be artificial intelligence security posture management, AISPM, I think is going to be the term next year that we're going to hear constant over and over again. I could be wrong. You see, let me know. Hit me up, identityjedi@gmail.com. Come to the mailbag. What do you think, right? Do you think it's really a thing? How do you think data comes back? And actually, now that we're in the post, I remember what I lost my train of thought on during the interview. Some of the things that we're also going to have to see. So data classification, data labeling, data security, that's going to come back. Also, SQL injection. Things around how are we protecting the information that's getting prompted into these LLMs to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do and not responding other things, right? So I think prompt injection is going to, I've seen some research into it. I've seen some areas of where it's possible. I don't know all the details because I haven't researched it, but I think that whole thing, just like with SQL injection, is going to come back. Again, think about how we're building these interfaces, right? So let's go back to why SQL injection was a thing, because we had an application, right? We had an application that handled business logic. We had a user interface that collected prompts and information from the user, went through the application, and then he accessed the data, right? And most of the time we're accessing the data, we're doing database calls, right? So once I get the business logic, I take the input from the user, I marshal it, I send it down to the data tier, I get something back. And we were just passing it straight through. We're going to see the same thing with AI. Think about it. You have an AI prompt, whether it's natural language or whatever you're doing, it's going back, searching data, returning things back. So if we don't have that same kind of prompt or SQL type injection of, are we parsing what the users put it in there? Are we putting guardrails around understanding what input we're seeing and how we're processing that? We're going to have the same type of attack surface again. So like one of my mentors told me very early on, man, everything in this freaking field tends to repeat itself. So Interesting times ahead. I love it. I think it's crazy innovative. I think it's moving crazy fast. It's about time. Identity has been a slow moving market for so long. Now I think it's going to be moving faster than any of us ever expected, and great time to dig in. So that's a wrap for this episode. You guys know what it is. Be good to each other, be kind to each other, love each other, take care of each other. I'm going to add that part in. Make sure to like, rate, subscribe on whatever platform you listen to this on. You guys know it all goes a long way, and we do appreciate it. We'll see you guys on the next episode.
All I know, I'm focused, I can't stop. The hustle's all I know. I'm hungry, ambitious, my heart is on go. You in the presence of greatness, that's all you need to know.